Hello, welcome back to Blender Sushi Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna take a look at the new nodes in SpWaveform for Blender 2.81. We have actually this oscillator nodes, and we also have this waveform viewer. So this should be pretty easy. You just need to jump into it. I'm gonna try to rebuild this from scratch. So let me save this first and save it again. Version 2, and gonna delete everything. Okay, so we end up with this guy over here. I can delete. Okay, now we're gonna be using Oscillator. So this node is really quite interesting. The sine wave is something that normally you can create using scalar math and using the sine function. Where is the sine function? There's the sine and cosine. So yeah, but with sine oscillator, with this oscillator node, you have some of the most common waveform like squares or triangles. It's actually really similar to the audio nodes, and we want to be able to view this. So let's use the stethoscope for the starter. So you can see with a value of 1, we have a value of 1 over here. And if I play around with this number, you can see the value goes ups and down like a sine wave. If I try to display this using VD, so viewer draw, if I plug this into the vector, we're not gonna see anything. But if I use vector in, and let's try play around with the number. So I plug this into the X, right? And then I scrub this value, and you can see the value that's kind of going ups and down. Okay, so that's interesting. That's something. And then if we increase the amplitude to 5, you can see it's kind of going between 5 and -5, sort of. We can check up here. So what if we plug in range of number? So let's say we have number, okay, we have 10 value, and we plug this into this value. Now we're gonna get some kind of points. So it's 10 points, and it's kind of going up and down. If you want this to be like a proper sine wave, we can do it this way. So we want it to move ups and down in the Z axis, and we want the range of value in the X axis. So range of value can come from this guy. So now we start to have like a sine wave. Let's play around with this. Okay, start and stop can be, let's say we say 0 to 1 range of value, and we can increase the count of points, but it's better if we use step and adjust the step, and then now we can actually play with this value. So a better way is actually not to have a single number range, but actually have two. One is for the X, and the other one is for the Z. The count can be a single value. So this is how we can really start to understand the waveform. Okay, so the step is the one that's for the X. We can control the stepping. And this guy, maybe just leave it at a certain value, maybe 1, and then we can start to play with the period. I'm trying to get like a kind of like a default sine value. Let's see, we're not we don't need to worry about dy. So we can control the amplitude, the period. As the funny thing, when we play around with the period of the wave, occasionally you will see an interesting pattern like that. Suddenly you get this kind of like a fish. Let's say if I drag this value like that and then play around with amplitude and the period, occasionally we have a pattern. See, suddenly we have this kind of pattern. So that's interesting. So we have viewer draw, we can bake it, we can turn it into a curve, but let's use this SPWaveformViewer, and this one is a quite interesting viewer as well. So we have this value that's plugged into the X. We can plug this into the waveform viewer, and we have the SINE oscillator that we can also plug in there. And by default, we're gonna get this kind of square. Normally, I think I'm just gonna switch to 8, and then I increase the number of channel to 2. Now we start to see something. And we can adjust the size of the image or the size of the viewer. So we have this sine wave. This looks a little bit different to what we are seeing here. Let me try to adjust this, whether I'm doing this correctly. So this is 80. Okay, now this is starting to show the same thing, except that the viewer is kind of seems like a reverse. This one is going down like a cosine, but with the sine oscillator itself, we have a way to turn it into square or solve, triangle, custom, and we have, of course, offset. I think offset should be 0 by default. And then phase, we have phase, period. Like I said before, if we play around with the period, we can start to get an interesting pattern. See, suddenly we have like double of sine wave. But the actual graph is looking something like this. This is probably more accurate. If we have more sample here, we might get the same result. But because we have too many values, now we have like a double sine wave, things like that. If you ever want this to be like a proper line, for example, you can use UV connection, plug this vector in there, output the edges, and look at this using another viewer draw, maybe. Okay, now it makes sense, and we can bake it anytime you want. You can bake it, and we have result. Select this object, go to edit mode. Can I do that? There you go. All right, so delete these. Let's play around with the oscillator. Would be interesting to actually hear this this sound. What is this sound like? So you can try to connect this to audio nodes. I will try that probably in the next video. For now, I'm just gonna play around with this, trying to use different functions and try to see the result. So this can be a different color. So this is sine over sine, sine over square, nothing much, but try plugging it into the value or the amplitude or the period. So that's sine wave that goes into the value. So the value gonna go up and down. But normally what you really want is you have this number range. This one goes into the value, and then the amplitude, and then the result of the sine can be mixed together. Now you're gonna end up with a lot of shapes, unusual shapes that you can use, for example, to make like a revolve. So that's possible. I think we have lathe. Okay, lathe is revolve or spin. So this is vertices, this is the edges. You can try and revolve this guy. Okay, this one is revolving in the wrong axis. Should be X. Okay, so we have something pretty interesting, and we can offset the value ups and down, play around with the phase, the period, and this value is square, so triangles. So you get the idea, and if you're happy, you can just bake it. So this is just using the common wave functions. So this wave, we also have custom. Actually, with custom you can plug in your own noise. So look into vector noise and vector turbulence for that. But this is like starting to get complicated. But what's interesting, of course, is how the wave being generated, and then you're probably kind of wondering how this gonna sounds like. So you use audio notes for that. But this is basically how it is. This is the basic of how you can visualize the wave oscillator using WaveFormViewer, and then also how it becomes a mesh like this that you can bake and you can maybe print out. All right. So hopefully this is useful. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.